Hi, my name is Wa and welcome back to my studio. In this video, we're going to go over the 5 things I wish I knew before my very first market. I've been doing markets for almost 2 years now, and I wish I had something like this to give me practical but also inspirational tips would help my market be successful and also improve my markets in the future. And stick around to the end because my last is the most controversial and some people may not agree with it. So, you just got accepted to your first market and you're nervous. It's normal and it's okay. So the first thing that we're going to focus on is what we can control. This means getting as much information as possible about the event, about parking, about any kind of vendor fees you have to pay, any insurances you have to have for that specific market, any restrictions that market has. For example, some markets don't allow any kind of gory material or anything scary, especially if it's a family-friendly event. So those are things you're gonna wanna look up before your first market. Once you're accepted and you've learned all you can about the vendor information, the next thing you're gonna look at is your booth number, and you're gonna make a plan on how to get there. The next thing to kind of take a note of, is there a concession nearby? Is there restrooms nearby? Just kind of be aware where you're at in the market map. This is especially helpful when you arrive to not feel so overwhelmed because you know exactly where you're going, you know exactly where you're gonna park, and you know where amenities are if you need them. So secondly, you need to prepare more stock than what you think. One of the biggest regrets that I hear from first-time market goers is that they did not have enough stock, or they wish they would have stocked more of a certain item. I would say within your means to prep as much as possible, because you never know what kind of demographic is going to be there and you might do really well. I like to err on the side of optimism, so it's better to just be prepared rather than to get there and a few hours into the market you're out of something that is your best seller. So for example, my first market, I only brought a handful of prints and I sold 3 of them. I could have easily brought more and probably doubled the amount of prints that I sold. So don't get in your head about having a wide range of items. Just focus on what you're already selling the best of and try to bring as much as that as possible within means. You don't want to go severely over budget for this, especially for your first market. The third thing we're going to do before we actually get to the market is prepare our setup. So the night before or a couple nights before, however long you want to practice this, you're going to practice setting up your booth display. It doesn't have to be exact, but set up your table the way you think you're going to on market day and set up your displays. A big time waster at your first market is setting up displays. So if you're comfortable with your displays, you know exactly where your displays are going and where your products are going, then you're going to minimize the amount of time you spend on this as much as possible. This also gives you a chance to see if your products are visible to the customer and if you have a nice layout that is easily accessible for your customers. The worst thing is whenever you're at your market, you're setting up the way you thought it was going to work, and then you realize there's a bush this way. They're not even going to see this table if they're walking past it. If you know your spot, then you're able to adjust what your booth is going to look like based on the surrounding area. This also gives you some time to look at your display and to see if you have any gaps and where you can fill gaps as much as possible. You don't want your table to look barren. The fuller your booth looks, the more likely people are going to come in and look, because it looks like you have a lot of options. Even if you are spacing out the same product across 3 different tables, your display and setup really does matter. Okay, now that we have learned all we could about our first market, we've prepared a little bit more stock than we think we're gonna need, and we've practiced setting up our booth. The next thing we're going to do is to take all of our stuff to our booth spot. And this is where I recommend some good transportation. This could be a wagon, a box that has wheels, anything with wheels, basically. Especially if you're carrying heavy stuff, wheels are gonna be your best friend. I personally have gone way too long without utilizing a wagon or storage boxes with wheels. Wagons are a huge time saver because you can stack them full of all of your displays and supplies and bring it to your booth spot. You can unload and go back and forth for as many trips as possible with the least amount of energy. You're already going to have to set up a tent, set up tables, set up your displays, set up banners and decor around your booth. So you really don't want to be spending the majority of your energy carrying all of those supplies to your booth spot. My last and probably most controversial tip before your first market is to not buy anything. When you're there, it's going to be a little overwhelming. You're going to see people that are striving to do exactly what you're doing, which is to make money off of your craft. I feel that it is very important for you, don't spend any of the money that you make that day. The reason that I feel like this is a good tip before your first market is because markets are hard and they're nerve-wracking, and sometimes you don't have the best experience. So you're going to need as many wins as possible, and seeing the amount of money that you made at the end of the day is going to be a driving factor for you to go and do more markets. Now say you take your earnings and at the end of the market you go around and shop. At the end of the day, you have nothing to show for it. And I feel like when you're trying to build a sustainable business, you need wins like that to propel you forward to the next level so you can support other vendors because you have the margin to do so. There will be time to shop later, but you're trying to make a great first market. So don't blow your earnings. Those are my 5 things I wish I knew before my first market. I hope this video was helpful and maybe a little bit more insightful to how markets work and what you need to do to prepare, and also how to be successful before and after. Market season is fast approaching, so if you would like to see me do my markets this spring, make sure you're subscribed and you have notifications on so you know when I post my next market video. I hope this was helpful, and I will see you in the next video.